viewers, welcome to this week's special program we have for you for this evening. We are at the National Confederation of Eritrean Workers, where a panel discussion is taking place under the title Self-Reliance and Partnership, the Eritrean Experience and its Global Relevance. This panel discussion is taking place on the occasion of the United Nations Day, which will be celebrated on October 24. October 24 also marks the organization's 80th anniversary, this panel discussion, dear viewers, is taking place at a time when the international system is under immense strain. Persistent inequalities, climate threats, decreasing international solidarity, shrinking aid, and mounting debt are undermining progress in many parts of the world. Also, the Sustainable Development Goals, adopted as a universal blueprint for peace and prosperity, stands at a critical juncture, with only 5 years remaining and no country on track to fully realize the ambitions of the goals, which is why this panel discussion is taking place to mark Eritrea's journey, which offers a timely lesson in this regard. The philosophy of self-reliance remains a cornerstone of the country's nation-building and development strategy. Therefore, dear viewers, I give you the panel discussion entitled Self-Reliance and Partnership, the Eritrean Experience and its Global Relevance.
It is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's panel discussion on self-reliance and partnership, the Eritrean experience and its global relevance. I extend heartfelt appreciation to the government of the state of Eritrea and to all of our partners for your continued collaboration and engagement. This year marks the first time UN Day in Eritrea is being observed through a panel of this nature, an intentional shift from ceremony to conversation, to reflect together on where we stand globally and how we chart the path forward. 80 years after the signing of the UN Charter, we are reminded that this milestone is not only a moment of commemoration, but of reflection. The UN was established not only to prevent the recurrence of war, but to lay the foundation for a more sustainable, equitable, and collectively governed future. That vision now faces profound tests, from persistent inequality and conflict to climate pressures and diminishing solidarity. Reductions in official development assistance are compounding these crises and reversing hard-won gains. The OECD projects that bilateral aid to least developed countries could fall by 13 to 25% in 2025, with countries in sub-Saharan Africa facing even larger declines. UN agencies and the World Bank are raising the alarm that these funding gaps are already translating into rising mortality, food insecurity, lost schooling, and weakened social protection systems, eroding the resilience of those least able to bear the impact. There is no doubt that in the immediate term, funding cuts are having dire consequences. However, there is also a need in this moment to have an honest conversation about the nature of aid itself. While international solidarity remains vital, we must take a hard look at the limitations of ODA. And as we reflect globally, we must be informed by local experiences. There is nowhere better to have this conversation than where we are today. Eritrea's approach offers valuable lessons for how cooperation can be more sustainable, equitable, and rooted in national ownership. From its inception, Eritrea has embraced a philosophy of self-reliance, not as isolation, but as empowerment. It is a model that speaks to Africa's current moment and to the UN's own objectives, building equal partnerships for sustainable growth. There are 5 lessons I believe the Eritrean experience offers for others. They include national ownership, domestic resource mobilization, people-centered development, collective participation, and long-term vision. Together, these lessons show how partnership can strengthen, not substitute, national capacity and ownership. At a time when the global community is rethinking models of aid and cooperation, Eritrea's experience offers an important reference point, illustrating how self-reliance and partnership can coexist to deliver meaningful results. Its lessons speak not only to Africa's broader efforts to advance sustainable homegrown development, but also to the ongoing UN reform agenda, reminding us that effectiveness begins with alignment, respect for sovereignty, and genuine national leadership. This is indeed a compelling model for renewed multilateralism and effective cooperation. As the UN team, we hope today's panel will inform, solicit dialogue, highlight practical lessons, reflect on the future of international cooperation, and encourage reflection on the UN's evolving role as a partner that enables national leadership and local solutions. In closing, I once again thank the government of Eritrea and all our partners for your continued collaboration. Let us use this occasion to reaffirm our shared commitment to peace, dignity, and sustainable development for all. Thank you. The objectives of today's panel are fourfold. First, to enhance the understanding of Eritrea's philosophy of self-reliance in relation to nation building and development. Second, to examine the links between Eritrea's approach and the UN's founding principles of sovereign equality, multilateralism, and partnership while contributing to discussions on UN reform. Third, to invite bilateral partnerships to reflect on Eritrea's approach and the UN's role in fostering collaborative and effective partnerships, and to share lessons from their own experiences of engaging with self-reliance in different contexts. And lastly, to identify lessons from Eritrea that may inform development pathways in other countries, highlighting the relevance of self-reliance. The panel will be formatted into two sections. The first section will include 3 rounds of questions to allow our esteemed panelists to elaborate on the context of development and self-reliance, to raise specific lessons learned, and to consider ways forward. The second session will then be an open discussion. I invite the audience to deeply engage and to ask the critical questions.
So the origins of self-reliance, to come back to your questions, it started during the liberation struggle. You know, as we all know, the Eritrean liberation struggle is a bit unique in the sense that it doesn't have any assistance from either camps of the Cold War. In fact, the enemy, Ethiopia, was actively supported by both the United States, the Western camp, and the Eastern camp, the Soviet Union. So this notion of self-reliance came out of necessity for Eritrea. So as to the question, you know, for me, what stands out is the fact that the government of Eritrea was able to identify the dangers of aid dependency as early as mid-90s. And then taking concrete steps towards national control of the development agenda, and aligning any foreign assistance with the national priorities was what stands out for me. You know, Eritrea does not reject foreign assistance. It just thinks, or it insists that it be genuine and complements the national priority. So it has basically, in other words, they should be phasing out of aid. Aid should be like time-bound. It should not create structural dependency.
How does the UN see self-reliance and multilateral cooperation working together?
Okay, thank you, and thank you so much for having me. And for us, I think I like what he said because it really sets the stage in terms of what we see as the UN. And I think it's not a question of whether we have self-reliance or multilateral cooperation, but it's mutual reinforcing. So it's both at the same time. And what sets the stage, I think, when you look at the model of Eritrea, and in particular looking at the ownership, you know, there's I always tell that I have worked in I've been in my research work and policy work, I've been engaged in 15 countries before coming to Eritrea 2 years ago. And for me, the sense of strong ownership that you see here in terms of also commitment, like Nala said, commitment that the priorities are led by the government. And so the UN does not come to set the priorities, rather to provide the technology, the innovation to align to the priorities that are already led by the government. So the work of the UN is to complement and not to replace. And looking at what we are looking at here, especially in terms of what are the opportunities, is then to be able to align also in terms of resource mobilization. How can we mutually be able to provide resources that can support those priorities? And what we see here, of course, is very strong leadership by the government in terms of also providing domestic resources, as Nala has also pointed out in her 5 key points that she presented today. And we then come to just complement. So the government is taking the leadership. We are aligning to their priorities. We are aligning to the strategy of the government. And that is also through a lot of engagement. So engagement with the line ministries, and also with key stakeholders at different levels. So not just at national level, but also below national level. So that's how we see it. And to ensure that there's also accountability. So together it's a partnership of equals, and where we are bringing the solidarity in with the government, working towards the vision that the government is leading. So it's a government-led vision and priority, and we come just to complement. So that's how I see it. And it's really exciting to see how that now has also preceded the times we are in. And has been presented that this is a model now that is becoming something that other countries can learn from, because it's a model that has not only been tested, but it's a model that has shown a lot of great results that other countries can be able to learn from. Yeah.
Let me start by picking on your question. So my first point is definitely the African voice is growing globally, but is it being heard? That I'm not really sure that it is the case. Which takes me to another point, is multinational diplomacy, multilateral diplomacy, right now in its best conditions, or the challenges to the system is too great that is affecting working together, really. If I can try to dissect this a little bit more, my background, one of my background is on the COP27, climate change. So what we're saying is self-reliance is not isolation. You cannot exist alone. You try to make things happen by yourself, but if the system itself is skewed against your interest, then there is a lot of challenges that is happening to your own interest. On that, for example, all countries are affected by climate change. African countries are specifically affected by climate change even more than industrialized countries, while at the same time they are contributing minimal emissions of climate change gases. We have proposed a lot of different tools to try to ameliorate the situation, like adaptation fund, like loss and damage fund. And all of those funds have existed, but they're not funded properly. So a country like Eritrea, for example, that, we're all living here and we're all witnessing the effect of climate change on the patterns of rain, patterns of hail that we saw the last year. And it is affecting, of course I stand to be corrected by IFAD, but it is affecting the growth of crops in Eritrea. This is really why the adaptation fund and the loss and damage fund were created. But still, they're not properly funded, but still, they're not helping a country like Eritrea to self-rely. So this is on the global level. Your question goes into the regional level as well. Regional cooperation is a must. Again, no country can exist alone. No country, Eritrea just opened the monitoring station for locust. This is an affliction that is affecting the whole of African continent, from Mauritania west to Eritrea east. You cannot do this alone. It has to be set in a whole regional or a continental effort to fight locust, for example. And this is why you need to do more on cooperation, regional cooperation. But to do that, you have to have infrastructure, you have to have mechanisms, and you have to be really looking, I like to say, to call it looking sideways rather than looking north. And for that, to be able to achieve your objectives. Relying on yourself, yes, but in a regional context where everyone is benefiting from that.
Turning to the subject of today, the principle of self-reliance certainly is important in the development of what I would call resilience of a state. But I think what I'm also hearing from speakers is that at the same time the notion of self-reliance needs to be accompanied by openness and partners in order to avoid isolation, but also to be able to magnify that resilience that states seek. In terms of the EU support for self-reliance and resilience in Africa, that was the objective of the question addressed to me. The EU supports projects respecting, for example, local ownership of priorities, the strengthening of institutional capacity, promoting economic and resource sovereignty, backing African-led security and resilience initiatives, encouraging regional integration and continental agendas, and also engaging with the private sector and the diaspora. And I'll come back to that at a later stage. How do we do this? We do this mainly through the Global Gateway instrument, which represents a European investment package aimed to support different regions in the world, but for example also in Africa, with the aim of creating strong, inclusive, green and digital recovery and transformation. Again, the support towards acceleration of the green and digital transitions, acceleration of sustainable growth and decent job creation, strengthening of the health systems, but also improving education and training. This Global Gateway Africa-Europe investment package is being implemented through Team Europe initiative. So essentially it's the EU, the member states, but also the European financial institutions that work together to support concrete and transformational projects jointly identified in priority areas with partners. So again, the idea of starting from the needs of partners. This has led, for example, to 150 billion euro in investments in Africa, so a very important instrument. And again, and I think I've heard that also in Nahla's introduction, this instrument is a move away from dependency-based aid towards partnership for autonomy. So again, more and more ownership in terms of our partner countries. I'll also mention briefly the Samoa agreement, trade agreement with the ACP countries, where again we see this shift that focuses more on ownership of our partner countries. So these are amongst the tools that we have in order to support resilience in Africa.
Eritrea operationalizes this self-reliance through policies like domestic resource development. This is not only human resource, but human resource and financial resource of the country. Basically, the source of funding should come from domestic resources. I think the second one is government-led development plans. Government is not the only player in the economy, but the private sector is always welcome. But the priorities are set, with involvement of the government. The other one is the limited but carefully managed aid. The problem with development assistance is, it's always too little, too late. So for a country like Eritrea with competing priorities, for example, in the social justice, access to education, access to healthcare, access to drinking water, you cannot rely on foreign funds. It's always difficult if you rely on them, where you have competing and pressing issues and priorities. So you manage whatever comes your way, you manage it carefully, but you rely on your own domestic resources. So the focus in here has been given to access to free education, to healthcare. So basically what we call social justice is the equitable distribution of income in this country. So with this We've seen a lot of progress in child mortality, for example. Mothers' maternity deaths has been reduced significantly. Life expectancy has been improved. You know, food and agriculture productivity has improved also thanks to the public construction of micro and macro dams and soil and water conservation schemes that we have. A lot of progress has been registered in recent years with limited, but like I said, carefully managed resources. So that's what milestones that I can mention.
So one of the ways that I could say is that first, of course, is to invite everybody to read our latest report, the 2024 report that lays out what we've been able to achieve in that year. And you will see there's been several programs and very exciting results that we lay out as a UN country team. But to mention that it's all the entities working together. So it's not that we work in silo, but we're trying to work together. And how we do that is because we have our cooperation framework that lays out what are the priorities that we are focusing on in the cooperation framework, what are some of the outcomes, and how are we organizing ourselves. So we organize ourselves also across different pillars, and we then work towards delivering. So if I could provide examples, and I think I will be biased to start with the work that is on food security and livelihoods. If you look at the support the UN has been providing, there are several programs that the UN is supporting. One of them is the Date Palm Initiative, which was featured in this UN, in the World Food Day. It was featured, the program on the date palm. And also it was also actually featured today in an op-ed that was published by UNDP. So that initiative that has brought together several agencies, including UNDP, as well as FAO and IFAD, is looking at how to support Eritrea to become a date exporting country, which is a really ambitious initiative by 2030. And already there's a lot of progress that has been achieved. So far, there's been over 300,000 in vitro plants that have been imported, that also have been planted in farmers' fields. So we start to see those results towards realizing that ambition. There's also been concrete efforts in fisheries development, and in that space, there's been the support towards not just identifying additional products that are suited for nutrition needs, suited for domestic markets also, but also that can be able to support the regional market as well as international markets. So towards that, there's been a lot of efforts towards capacity building, identifying also some of the products that need to be commercialized in different types of markets, as I've said earlier. And so one of the aspects has also been that there's been some support towards building of fisheries plants. So actually last year, and I see the director from the Ministry of Marine Resources has also joined us from Massawa, so we appreciate that as well. They completed 2 plants that are going to help with support of also several partners, including the German embassy, that are going to support the drying of fish using solar, and also are going to support also the aspect of also reducing post-harvest losses. So those are some of the aspects. There's a lot of also support with the Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Marine Resources towards conservation efforts. So you're going to see the watersheds. Over 25,000 hectares of watersheds have been reclaimed around the dams. There have also been efforts to start and to have in the coastal areas the mangrove replantation. So over 450 hectares were replanted over the last 2 years. So those are some of the efforts that are happening in that sector. And I would like also to say that is also in terms of provision of services, like was said earlier. So the UN is also convening a support around basic services in the education and health sectors, and also other social services. And in that, one of the notable aspects we've seen is that Eritrea actually in September, convened a forum where several countries participated and to understand what are the lessons in eradication of female genital mutilation, which Eritrea has made a lot of progress. So one of the aspects we see is that, for example, that forum, which was supported by UNFPA and UNICEF, has been able to demonstrate what Eritrea has done in that space. And some of the results we are seeing is that Eritrea has been able to support over 185,000 mothers to be able to receive support on nutrition, so for interventions. And also it has been, the country team, or the UN country team, was able to also support that 81% of births are taking place in health facilities. And to talk about also, another example is also for energy access and infrastructure, which is some of the work that we are also working with the African Development Bank as a country team. And in that, as you've seen, we have also tried to expand access to not only renewable energy, but also to ensure that there's expansion in terms of access. And some of it has led to an increase of electricity access to 52% from 40% in 2015. So some of these results, and I want to finish because Naomi is putting me on the spot to say that we can share a lot from the report that was published of the results from last year.
Using tools that are available, but only those who benefit you or fit your own plan, your nationally driven plan. Local ownership, national ownership, aid, for example. You take aid wherever in the sectors that you really need. There is a lot of temptation in different developing countries is to try to seek aid wherever it is available. And in that, they fall into the trap of not being very clear of what they want to do or playing to the tune of others, basically, playing to the priorities of other funding agencies. I think Eritrea in that was very clear of what they want to do, what are the tools that they need to do that, and they have been going after that. Self-reliance, again, is not isolation. So you need to reach out to your partners and the things that you need to do your development. Capacity building, for example. I think this is one of the things that everyone can contribute with Eritrea for the development of Eritrea in capacity building. This is what they need. Teach us how to fish, don't give us the fish. I think also the self-reliance, the model of Eritrea, is reminding us of a model that was the main model back in the 1950s and 60s, which is self-reliant, import substitution, industrialization. Those were actually the origin of the Asian miracle, if you will. But they have been replaced into other kind of models. IMF, World Bank, recommendations, and I'll put it as recommendations, for development, for budgets, for macroeconomics. They're not necessarily encouraging to this model, if you will. So this is a throwback to that. And I think one last point that I'm really impressed with in the Eritrean case is they do not overpromise. There's a lot of developing countries that go out there and say, we are going to achieve prosperity in 5 years, which is practically impossible. But they promise that they are going to rely on their own resources and they will take whatever time it is needed to achieve this development. And I am really impressed with that.
For example, in the case of the EU, despite the fact that since 2021 there has been no national indicative program or formal bilateral development cooperation, the EU continues to support Eritrea in its objectives through thematic instruments. Just to give you an idea of cooperation and support under the previous National Indicative Program, this extended to the areas that are of key priority to Eritrea, and we've already heard a lot about food security and the aim of supporting poverty reduction, but also, for example, in the energy sector, which is yet again another priority for Eritrea through, for example, support for the expansion of LPG storage, or also a solar mini-grid for rural towns in Eritrea. If we look at the situation currently under the thematic programs, again, we support Eritrea in achieving also her objectives. To cite a couple of areas where this cooperation is ongoing in terms of, for example, climate and smart agriculture, where we support dairy value chains, soil fertility and climate change adaptation in the highlands, but also harnessing for improved potato seed systems. There are also ongoing efforts and cooperation on cultural heritage, another key priority for Eritrea, but also in terms of health and social protection, also a key priority for Eritrea in terms of its principle of leaving no one behind, and there again support in terms of the Orota Referral Pediatric Hospital, promoting sustainable job opportunities for vulnerable youth and women, and already mentioned the support for protection of young girls and women's rights in Eritrea through addressing female genital mutilation, where we support UNICEF. And we saw the results of the recent field visit, which helped to highlight the positive outcomes of this project. So again, Eritrea remains a key priority for the European Union. The relationship has been built over a number of years since the EU first opened its embassy here in Asmara, and we remain open to exploring constructive ways to cooperate in line with Eritrea's vision of self-reliance and shared commitment to genuine partnership. And I'm hearing a lot about this partnership sense. Some of the positive lessons, I think others have already spoken to that. It's this prioritization of local ownership of development strategies. I think other speakers have mentioned this as something unique and very valuable from the Eritrean experience, but also valuing the diaspora as a development actor. So those are some of the elements that we can eke out of this partnership over the years. Thank you.
Dear viewers, that wraps up our program for this evening. It is good night from us.